Our lesson today is a real important one, I think, for us, and I giving thanks that I'll be able to impart it to you in a way that that part of you which will say, oh, I've heard that before, will not keep it from really registering in a very deep way within your soul. The title of the talk is Watching Life Go By. And this could be a title that could be used in many ways. I found myself thinking of that old song. Wasn't it a song, Watching the Girls Go By? Yeah. And a very clever tune. I had to push that one out of my mind. I said, no, I want to keep that title anyway. Watching life go by is sometimes used as sort of a negative word, I think, because it infers that, someone's sitting on the sidelines just watching life go by in a very unproductive sort of thing, in a meaningless way. But hopefully you'll remember this title in the way I wish to share it, which is in a very positive, meaningful way, that you and I learn to watch our lives go by, not in a sense of sitting, doing nothing, but in a sense of a very keen, loving, caring observer of one's own life. I don't know that I've shared this with you before, but perhaps I have, in talking about our men's prayer breakfast. Some months back, we began a new format for our men's prayer breakfast, which I think has become very successful and meaningful to all of us. We certainly have a marvelous spirit in our men's group now, I think, as a result of this. What we've done is we have different men in our program share. At each of our breakfasts, we devote ourselves to just listening to one man tell his life story. And I do a little interview, and I sort of help guide it sometimes, but sometimes I just have to sit back with the rest of them as the person gets this flow going, telling about his life story. Without any real probing or effort, in almost every instance, of course, it brings them up to the point as to how they discovered unity or the spiritual insight about their lives and the great meaning it has for them. These stories have been significant because as observers, being able to sit and listen to these stories, we do it every 2 weeks, you begin to appreciate that it isn't just in the history books where you read about somebody's life, like a Winston Churchill, and you can say, oh yes, wasn't that significant when that happened to Churchill? That certainly, because he was born in that family, that gave him a lot that had to do with the unfoldment of his life. Or certainly that his mother was of an American heritage, had a great impression on his life. It isn't in just the stories of the people in the history books. You begin to appreciate that every life has a story. And every life is moved by the events of its life. As if indeed, and it is true, there is this invisible presence that is constantly seeking to move a life toward its unfoldment of greater and greater good. Now, sometimes when the individual is telling his own story, it's difficult because of sometimes a little self-consciousness, which is understandable. Sometimes there's obvious emotion being felt by the teller of the story. Certainly much more so than we who are just listening to the story. As we listen to the story, because it's not our story, we can practice a very important process, and that is, we are not emotionally involved with the story. And because this is true, I think it is far clearer, usually, for those of us who are just listening to these stories, rather than being the teller, to see this person's life and appreciate the turns that it has taken because of some of the events that they tell us about, and most especially some of the more challenging events that they tell us about. You see, the key and the thing that I'm bearing in on in this particular lesson is that when you are emotionally involved with a situation, especially when you deem the situation to be negative, it is often impossible for you to draw from that situation and from your whole life, and its part in your whole life scene, the message that you really need to draw from it. And that it is only a position of emotional unattachment that really affords us the opportunity to clearly appreciate the unfoldment of a life and what a particular circumstance means to that life story. Above all, It is the emotional unattachment and the proper appreciation of the experience that allows us to keep our mind on a great truth, which you and I can never hear often enough, and that is that there is never and never will be any other intent by the creative force of the universe to bring your life to anything but an increasing positive expression of good. When I say good, I don't mean goody-good. I mean joy, happiness, success, and above all, inner contentment and a sense of well-being. That is the only plan that God has for you. And I know I have to say that hard because I know how humanly we can doubt it. And we can doubt it. Even though part of us hears it, there's a part of us that doubts it because we think, well, maybe I'm supposed to suffer a little while. Because you see, the reason you think that is because you and I say you, all of us, we do not take the position of the unattached observer who knows that life is for good and who can, and from that, and for growing, and therefore can take that impersonal view of these big, awful mistakes that you and I make all the time. We, right in the midst of them, are so able to say to ourselves, well, I should have known better, I did know better, etc., and I'm not worthy. And we have to scramble a long time till we can forget that thing. Whereas if we could step back and unemotionally view what the purpose of life is, be convinced that life is only for good, minding ourselves is for growing, we wouldn't lay that upon ourselves at all. So the key that I'm hammering on today is, are you watching your life go by as an emotional observer seeking to draw from every experience what you need to draw from it only for growth and learning? Or are you all bogged down in the emotions of it and gripping yourself around the neck, holding yourself where you are because you won't let go of the negatives and the negative emotions that are involved in it? You and I should be able to take this detached position and say, to look at these experiences of life, to be able to deal with such a question as, what is it that I'm supposed to learn from this? And more importantly, perhaps, where is this going to move me? What good can I see being brought into my life by this challenge, by this change, by this that has happened? And actually enjoy a certain sense of excitement about this thing that has happened in your life. Now, I'm just suddenly I want to make an insert here, which I hadn't intended, because it is Mother's Day. I did not write this talk. I could give this talk any Sunday. But you know, a good mother, and in times past, those of you who've been with you remember when we recognize Mother's Day or Father's Day in our church, we do it in the full awareness that there are some mothers and fathers who fall short of what, in quotes, a good mother or a good father is. But we celebrate the potential of perfect motherhood or perfect fatherhood. And perfect motherhood, certainly one of the great ingredients of it is that capacity that Nancy sang a song this morning, which happened to be my mother's favorite song, Ah, Sweet Mystery of Life, Love is the Only Answer. The perfect mother consciousness is a consciousness of love, but a very special kind of love. It is a love that is expressed from a position of detachment. That it is not a love that gets all wrapped up with their child, tries to possess it, but it stands back, it loves and supports, but it also is able to express toward that child from a standpoint of wisdom, which can only be gained when you're not emotionally involved with the child. Let me give you an example. This didn't happen to be a mother's love, it happens to be a wife's love. We had a call this morning from a woman whose husband is going through very, very difficult physical challenges. And it was in great pain and a number of other difficulties. And she called, obviously in great emotional negative stress, saying that she knew he needed to be in the hospital, but his word was, don't take me, don't take me, don't take me. And so we helped her to get still and get centered, and then to speak the word that in the light of what she was saying, it was obvious that he was going to receive better help and it would be better for all concerned to be in the hospital. And so we said, if you love him, you'll not listen to his word, and you will do what needs to be done, which he did, and which in the long run will prove to be the best. You see, you can only make a decision based on wisdom when you're not all involved in emotion, when you can get unattached. And that's the value that we often play in each other's lives. When we're not emotionally attached and someone comes to you to help, what shall I do? You often speak with much more wisdom. So, this is the position we're seeking. Now, some of the things that come into our lives that seem to be the directing forces so often in this pattern, this plan, this programming that each of our lives has are experiences that are often called experiences of the loser or of defeat, something that challenges us as a great negative. And so I was interested as I was putting these thoughts together and remembering some words that were spoken by James Decker, who's the author of an excellent Unity book, What Will You Have? Some of you undoubtedly have read it. And in it, he has a chapter on losing, on being a loser. And he points out that most persons, when they experience being the loser in life, having an experience like that, we often think of it as an appalling situation, especially if it involves major stakes, we might say. Certainly, it brings sadness to our life and the feelings of being something bad. But he reminds us it's only because our perspective is wrong that we are too close to the situation, which relates to what I've been saying to us, you see. And he gave a marvelous illustration. He said, if anybody who has followed what the astronauts have said will recall that the astronauts tell us that when they're circling this Earth of ours at a distance of 500 miles, that there is no way that they can distinguish that there's any trace of humanity on the Earth. That from 500 miles out, you cannot possibly discern that this is nothing but an uninhabited, beautiful world. But you say, because of your position, a very impertinent position, you say, hey, I'm here. I know humanity's here. And of course, at 100 miles out, you could discern it too. You could see movement, etc. But at 500 miles out, you can't see it. Because all life is a matter of perspective. And therefore, in that case, you've got to come a little closer. In the case that we're talking about, you've got to get a little further. You have to get back and get emotionally removed to get the proper understanding of what's really involved in the circumstance. And in this case, this so-called losing circumstance. Unemotionally, what is involved in every experience that a loser could participate in, that is, it's potentially there, if you get the right perspective. And that is, it offers you the opportunity for correction, which is not at all a sad thing. Indeed, it's an imperative experience. Let's appreciate this. Success, which we all love to think about more, success keeps us repeating what we have done. If somebody says to you, how'd you do that? Often the answer is, well, I don't know, but whatever you did, keep on doing it. Isn't that right? And that makes sense, because he brought us a successful end. But you see, the only difficulty about that is, that would infer that you've got your whole life put together. And you don't. No one has. There are obviously changes that have to be made in you. So obviously, we not only need the successes to support us what we are doing right, we need those experiences that bring about a correction. And in the case of this particular negative kind of challenge called the losing kind, it's often a very important kind because it usually humbles us. And this seems essential to the human soul and its progress. We need to be humbled from time to time because the human ego gets out of whack. It's understandable. We begin to think, I'm doing it. And you can never unfold your life plan. Not perfectly. No, I don't even have to throw in not perfectly. You just can't unfold your life plan if you think you're doing it. And so, as you know, we often have lessons to remind us. Our channel in life is to let God do things through us. And then things will work out the way we should go. So we need humility, and we need the corrective process that humility often brings to us. So when you have the right perspective and you find yourself suddenly in the middle of such a situation, then you can experience not the horrible sense of how could this happen, but rather you're able to step back, apply the proper thought of love towards yourself and appreciation and a real caring for your life process, realizing this is God moving through life. This really, it's so subtle, but I know you're with me in it. It isn't really you, but it is you. It's you because you have the capacity of ego to say, I am, and therefore I see this happening in my life and through me. But correctly, again, it is what God is trying to do through me, and somehow that's gotten mixed up, and I can see that now. And all the time loving myself the way God sees me, learn drawing from it what I need to draw, and then I go on. Always we have to deal with life's experiences in this manner. Decker also had something else that was good in this. He quoted Marcus Bach's work, which some of you have read, where Marcus Bach is speaking about serendipity. He's speaking about the Prince of Serendipity, dealing with one of life's most asked questions, and that is, why did this happen to me? And Bach has the princes of serendipity, three of them, they all have an answer. The first prince answers to that question and says, it happened either for your growth or for your guidance. Either for your growth or for your guidance. And that's true. That's true. Our purpose in life here is to grow. It's the only reason we're in this world, this very limited world in terms of our spiritual potentials. This is a very confining dimension we live in. And the reason we're stuck into it, as I remind, just the way you put that child in those blinking, confined walls of a schoolroom, is that you feel he needs, that's where he'll get the atmosphere for his learning. For learning, maybe that's not the best place, but in any event, that's what we do now. We stick them in those little rooms, you see, and they're supposed to learn. We are in a very confined space on this planet, this earth, and in what we can work with. Just like, it's frustrating to we great human beings to have to go sit in a gas station to wait for gas. There's something in us that resents it. Have you seen the pictures they had in Los Angeles? People are just furious. They're convinced. The oil company, the government are doing them in. And I don't know, I don't happen to agree with it. I think it's a very complex process that no one person's involved in. But what I'm getting at is, that is a very real frustration. We just know life should be so much easier than that. We've had it, we should have it. And it's true, and we'll work it out. Life is that kind of a process. I've gone a long field from that original question. Life is that kind of process. And so when anything happens in your life that is of a challenging, those things are bound to come along because it's part of that process of learning to grow and unfold. Now let me get to the second prince. The same question is asked. The second prince answers a little differently, and it's a little more challenging. It says, what happened because you drew the happening to yourself by conscious or unconscious forces within yourself. It says you're responsible. That's true. And it takes a big person to accept that. But again, it shouldn't be so big in a way because that's what we should expect. In the unfoldment of my soul, as I am seeking to go forward, I'm going to draw to myself experiences, either out of a conscious cooperation with the process or by unconsciously dropping into negative pits which are going to force me up and out again to get going. So I am a participant in my life's experience. Nobody's putting it on me, no matter how severe it seems. I am the participant. And then the last prince says to the question, why did it happen? And this is a very interesting one. What happened not for your benefit, but for the benefit and profit of someone else. Our lives are so interwoven. If we could see the pictures, husbands and wives, neighbors and friends, races, nationalities, we're all where we're supposed to be experiencing, because out of that combination of consciousness, there is a supposed to be, because each one of us sparks off onto the other things that are essential to this individual growing process. What happened not for your benefit, but for the benefit and profit of someone else. Something you may have experienced, even the negative ones, may have been, in this particular case, a giving on your part to arouse something in someone around you. The only thing you have to be careful about this one is it can be used as sort of a cop-out. Nothing wrong with me, but Mary Lou sure, if there's anybody here by the name Mary Lou, and I think there is, voice in person. so-and-so needed that, see? I'm okay, but they needed what happened. Well, that can be a case, and we have to leave that room, but at the same time, most often, it's our lesson that's involved. Now, have you ever had this happen? Somebody's reading a book, and you come up to them, and you start to talk to them, and you say, oh, I didn't mean to interrupt your reading. They say, that's all right, and they put the book down, and they say this word to you. I knew how it was going to come out anyway. Or I know what's going to happen anyway. Or maybe you've said that to someone when you were interrupted. And if you analyze it, you say, how did you know that? Well, I knew what was going to happen because I can see from what the characters in the story are doing or their thoughts are being projected, what they're saying. And when they're doing that, I know what's going to happen. Do you think in real life it's as easy for the characters that you've been reading about to understand that's going to happen to them? No. But you, as the detached reader, suddenly have this marvelous wisdom that you can see all this happening. And you and I can do the same thing for our own lives, just like we're reading a book. If we get this position of detachment and loving, caring detachment about our own life, and we practice taking times to draw back and look at our life, we can see that if we keep on the same path we're going, we know just exactly what we're headed for. Just like you have that wisdom when you're reading a book. Or have you perhaps heard over the kitchen coffee clutch or herb tea clutch, one neighbor say to the other, well, I can tell you, I know what's going to happen to Mary if she keeps that up. But how come Mary doesn't know? Because Mary is so emotionally involved in the experience, you see. So you can see the necessity to step back and to see your life from this position of equal emotional unattachment. Now, in closing, I have to emphasize what I began with. And I don't think that you and I are going to make the effort that we should make in this area or reap the benefits of it unless we have this total undergirding, and that is the sense that at no time is there any other plan for your life but fantastic good. The more I experience intuitively in my meditation experience, the more I feel I grow intellectually in understanding the way in which God has put the universe together, the more I observe your lives as my own, the more I become totally convinced that if there's any real sin in our lives, and sin means to miss the mark of real perfection, is that we just can't begin to comprehend how good God really is. We're still so caught up in what we presume to be the evil of our own soul or other souls that we just cannot begin to fathom how good this universe is and how we're moving toward that. And when you really know that, then, as I say, you can get this detachment from your life experiences and do the job you have to do. Yesterday, I had a funeral service, and afterwards a woman approached me, and she was not one of the family members for this particular service. She came up to me and thanked me for my part in the service. She said, you know, I've really had to apply what you were saying, and I received it as a blessing from another Unity minister many years back. She said, I lost 2 children. I lost my son at 27 years old, and I lost my daughter when she was only 33. And she left 3 children, 3 little children. And she said, somehow that Unity minister, way back then when I first had that service, in the midst of that experience, was able to get across to me that God is good, and that whether I can see it or not, in the midst of those situations, there was good moving for my children, their children who were left, and for me and for everybody. She said, it's still a miracle when I think about it that I was able to throw off all, the horrible thoughts that tried to come in about how could God do this to me and to my children? How can there be a God, etc. And as we talked, we realized again that it's all a matter of perspective. And let me just talk a minute about this death experience as a position of perspective again. And I want to make a comparison. And it's not meant to be light, because losing our loved ones is always challenging at best because we miss them. But in terms of appreciating the process of death and knowing that somehow it fits the patterns of lives, including your own. You get that only from a right perspective. So my comparison is this. Let me suppose that you have not had any fun in your life for a long time. And tonight we go to a party, and I mean a good party. It's, there are fun people there, people you enjoy, and you can see that it's going to be 4 hours of just really relaxing and having a change and enjoying yourself. And we've been in this party 10 minutes, and I say to you, we've got to go. And you think to yourself, my gosh, I haven't been to a party in years. I don't know when I'll ever get to another party, and this guy's telling me I got to go in 10 minutes. How do you think you'd respond? Well, you can imagine how you'd probably respond. But let me give you another thought. Let me suppose that we've gone to a party tonight, and you've been there 10 minutes. But the background on you is this. You go to a party every night. And they're all good parties. So, you're every evening. It's just fun time. And so, every night you're partying. And you know that not only do you go to parties, but tomorrow night you're going to a party, and the next night you're going to go to a party, and the next night you're going to go to a party. And we get to this party, and I say, hey, we got to go home. We've only been here 10 minutes. How do you think you respond this time? Well, the odds are, unless you have an abnormality, you'd say, okay, no big thing. You see, the truth about life is that there is only life. There is no death. No one ever dies. We change body expression, but there is only life. And when you have that perspective of that experience, then you realize that when we talk about programming and life's movement, it really, in terms of life and the onward progression, if someone leaves here after 10 years of life, or 20 years of life, or 30 years of life, or 90 or 100, in terms of the great progression of reality, it's no big thing. Now, as far as an individual soul and what you and I should seek today, we seek dominion, which may have a great effect upon our longevity. But in terms of well-beingness and the overall plan, it doesn't matter whether it's in this particular expression of life or the life that lies beyond this. But the only way you can know that, the only way you can do what this marvelous woman had done, which was to release her children and to stay positive and affirmative about her life, was to have that kind of perspective. And I bless the minister that helped her get that perspective in the midst of that experience, which she wouldn't have got without the help. She'd have been so close to it and bogged down in the sense of loss, you see. There's a marvelous psalm. 16th chapter, 11th verse. And it says, Thou wilt show me the path of life. In thy presence is fullness of joy. At thy right hand there are pleasures forevermore. Those poetic words are so true, I am convicted. As you lend yourself to your path of life, you will find that life will become more joyful, more pleasurable in every sense of the word, no matter what's going on here with gasoline shortages or anything else. It'll get better and better if you practice the emotional detachment of drawing from the challenges that come to your life, what you need to draw, the understanding and the wisdom to make the adjustments to go on that upward path. Well, I've talked too long today. I'm over time. Let's close our eyes now and give thanks for the wonder of it all, the wonder of our lives. And the wonder of our capacity to take a hold of a message like today, even though we may have never done it well before, or just partially, we can really get a hold of it. And suddenly see our lives for these meaningful, purposeful, growing, learning experiences. Loving ourselves, appreciating ourselves, and adjusting ourselves to receive the good that God has for us through growing. Thank you, Father, for this blessing today on this Mother's Day, that we truly mother ourselves as we should this day, through love and emotional detachment. Thank you, Father. Amen.